It's early morning, January 1st, 2024, and well, it's time to kind of really get things started. I've never practiced color, and I haven't made a color wheel in an awfully long time, but today is about the best day to get things started. Check the light. Of course, something's wrong. Bulb's gone out, and the camera's on autofocus. Great. Nothing ever gets started the way you want to. So I bought a Masterson's palette, and I've had my golden paints, cyan, magenta, and yellow for a little while, along with brushes and other stuff. But like I said, it's been a while since I've actually made a color wheel. Now, there's not really much to this. Just about anybody who's ever been in an art class has seen a color wheel. And if you've done any painting, chances are you've had to paint color swatches, color wheels, and whatever else might go along with your art class. Now, I've painted miniatures for a while, but to be honest, it's been a very long time since I've painted a color wheel. I've done plenty of miniatures, ruins, castles, trees, thieves, fighters, clerics, dragons, skeletons, and zombies since then. But a color wheel is something I haven't done in a very long time. It's rudimentary, but after watching a lot of videos here towards the end of 2023, started really thinking about what's coming up for 2024. If you're in the miniature painting part of the hobby, then you've probably seen all the rigmarole about Army Painter's new paints coming out. Just about every painter has got a video talking about what they think about the upcoming release of their new paint line. And I, for one, am pretty excited about it. This whole thing is part of a reboot. It's just starting all over again from scratch and trying to really think about what it is I'm going to do. And you may be wondering, if you're familiar with miniature paints, why am I just working with a color wheel? Well, the plan is to use the Army Painter paints as my main drivers. I've used Reaper for a very long time, but I'm just way out of practice with painting with paint. Say that twice. That's that thin. It's a little hard to do. And it's something you got to kind of get used to. But if the things that everybody is saying about Army Painter is going to be true, then, well, it's going to be a lot easier to reboot with them than it will be everything else. That doesn't mean I'm going to get rid of my Reaper paints. I like them, but they are going to kind of go to the back part of the shelf while I start to focus more on working with the Army Painter paints. This is something I've been meaning to do for a very long time, is to try and figure out where I really want to go with this. They talk about sunk costs a lot, and if you do miniature painting or you do any tabletop wargaming, you probably by now have realized the amount of money you sink into that part of the hobby. This is definitely not like role-playing games where you can collect hundreds of books, although you can spend a lot of money on RPG books as well. But when it comes to being involved in a war game, that's a lot of money. Doesn't matter how small the game is. You're going to be buying paints, you're going to be buying glue, brushes, and all the rigmarole that goes along with being involved with that. And that's a lot. But it's been a very long time since I've actually sat down and really painted. The hobby desk is a mess. As the rule of all flat surfaces go, it's a mess. And so right now, it's all tore down. Everything is getting redone, from how the paints are organized to how the table's organized to how the room is organized. So that's going to be a lot of work. It's just going to take some time to get everything done and taken care of. There's no way around that. In the meantime, though, since I'm not painting any miniatures, and I'm formulating a plan for what I'm going to be doing as soon as I do get my hands on the new Army Painter line, it felt kind of appropriate to go ahead and start really using my Golden Artist acrylic colors. And these literally are the only two colors I have. And I only bought these two colors on purpose. Towards the end of 2023, I was watching a lot of videos on miniature painting to start getting psyched about being involved in it again and just refocus my mind. And if you've seen miniature paints, you're probably wondering why in the heck I would bother with a color wheel when there's all kinds of tonal qualities, hues and shades, and everything else that goes in a miniature paint line. Well, the reason is because I want to learn how to do both. The Army Painter line I want to learn on its own, but this is really a first step in a back to basics. Really going back and looking at color and asking all the same questions over again, because realistically, it's probably been nearly half a year since I've painted a single mini, if that, probably even longer. But there's just a lot to do, and there's a lot to learn. So why bother with doing a color wheel? Well, I plan on doing the same thing with the Army Painter paints. When I get my hands on the entire line, I'm going to be constructing an entire color wheel out of their colors, just based off the individual bottles, so I can see them all on one page, all in one circle, and all together. Now, I know, you can look at them on the shelf, and that's really great. And they've got these things on the website where you can look at essentially a hexagon layout of all the colors and how they relate to each other. But there's a bit of difference between seeing the color printed on a bottle and seeing the color painted onto a piece of paper. And I'm sure that there is probably somewhere in the comments some art student somewhere freaking out about how terrible my bad color wheel is. But that's just it. It's the first color wheel since high school, realistically. And this is all just learning all over again. And handling Golden acrylics is not anything really like handling miniature paint. Well, I'm sure it's probably close, and there's a lot of miniature painters who probably just use Golden and don't buy an entire line of miniature paints. But some people like to mix, and some people don't. Some people like to just have that step done for them. That way it can just all be taken care of. It's just a lot easier that way to get things done. There's just something also relaxing about being here in the morning and working on something like this. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. We've only got 3 colors to work: cyan, yellow, and magenta. And I know that looks awfully red on the screen, but yeah, that is magenta. It's interesting to kind of work with a wet palette, especially a wet palette the size of the large Stay wet palette from Masterson. But it's definitely something that I'm going to have to get used to. Getting back in the habit of using it for this and other projects that will come up on doing things, this on this scale, along with using a smaller wet palette to work on miniatures with, and terrain and other things. And this really isn't a resolution video. This is just how I want to get started for 2024. Something to help me record myself and set my own tone for the things that I know are going to be coming up. I'm going to be looking at a lot of color. I'm going to be reading a lot on color theory. But the most important thing is to actually practice the color theory, to not just read about it, but to paint it. And that's really where the Golden acrylics come in. I know a lot of people in the miniature world, especially new people, will balk at the idea of paying a large sum of money for a tube of paint, when what they don't realize is that these standard colors are very intense. Even on paper like this, they're very intense. And they're very thick. They're not real heavy body, but you're going to get a lot of mileage out of a tube of Golden paint when you buy it. And especially if you're just playing around. It just kind of depends on how much you really want to work with it and how far you're really going to go. But the doing of the thing is really what's the most important. Just practicing mixing color and focusing on these three primaries, trying to make an orange that is a well balance between the magenta and the yellow, trying to make a green that is a well balance between the yellow and the cyan. And the same thing for violet, trying to get a balance between one that isn't too blue and one that isn't too red, and then being able to work all that out for yourself. And you really can only do it when you are actually performing it. There's still a lot of setup to do. I've got an art table that's going to go next to this easel that I have mounted on the wall and just outside my kitchen. And it's a convenient place to practice at. It's out of the way, and the easel doesn't stick out from the wall that far. It folds down against the wall and kind of gets out of the way even more. But even with the way it's set up now, it's not even pushed out, or pulled out, I should say, to full extension. And just trying to remix the violet here because it's definitely too blue. It's not red enough, and you can see the difference in the color. And a lot of it's just getting my eyes used to seeing these colors and seeing what I like in these colors. Really just trying to restart the basics. There are a lot of self-taught artists all over YouTube. A favorite of mine is 1000, and it was interesting the other day to kind of watch him use a liner brush for the first time, because how he talked about how he used the Posco paint markers to draw his lines with, and that he was getting back into trying to use a liner brush like the letter guys do. And even just something, practicing with a different kind of brush. This brush is way bigger than any brush I would ever use for painting a miniature with. It's also a different natural hair brush than the sable hair I would be using on a miniature. One of the things that I never really knew about until lately, watching the Miniac and his experience going over to have a class with Roman Lapat. And that is the chromatic gray, this idea that there is a gray made up of all the gray tones, or I'm sorry, all the primary tones. And it's kind of what you get. You get a gray. And I really do need to get titanium white and some black. But starting out now with just these colors and getting black and white on order is what's up next. Really didn't even think about it when I bought these. I should have bought it when I bought these, but that's okay. It's all just practice. And that's the main thing about the first day of 2024, is today is really just going to be a solid day of what am I going to get ready for? What am I going to get organized now this early in the year? And where do I want to be January 1st, 2025?